Hi everyone, welcome to Kalkona Cricket Cast. I'm your host today, Pratham. Not joined by Rowan, sadly. He's going to be out due to university classes for a couple of weeks. And today I'll be previewing the second ODI between England and Sri Lanka. So admittedly, I'm one match late to covering this ODI series, but given what's been happening in Sri Lankan cricket at the moment, can you really blame me? Right before the start of the series, they had their three probables in their batting lineup: Mendes, Dickwella, Gunathilaka, I think I'm getting that pronunciation right, banned for a COVID biobubble breach. And while these blokes weren't really killing it in the T20 series, Mendes in particular had an awful series. That came before the ODIs. To be fair, practically none of these Sri Lankan players acquitted themselves in that T20 series. They're still probably the best batting talents in the country for limit overs cricket, at least. Their other two rising talents were also out of injury. Oshada Fernando, he's a guy who I rate as highly as the next Mahela Jayawardene, and that's saying something. And Dhananjaya De Silva, an all-rounder who literally is the definition of cool. He's one of the coolest players in world cricket currently. Provides you with so much clutch, stylish batting at that number 5 spot, and has the ability to give you those 10 economical overs with his off spin. Both of them were out as well. So watching what was essentially a weak Sri Lanka B team go up against the reigning World Cup champions didn't really promise much in terms of a contest. Having said that, this bare-bones Sri Lanka team did surprise me a bit in that last match. First, that ultra-aggressive batting performance from Kusal Perera did take me as a surprise, as I thought he would try to curb his instincts as someone still settling into that new captaincy role. It was splendid batting too, by the way. No hack-like shots in that. It was sort of very much like his idol Sanath's innings, if you will, in being really destructive and finding gaps primarily square of the wicket offside, with that odd drive and lofted chip thrown in. And then you had the likes of Chamira and Fernando, right? Benora, gosh, there's so many Fernandos that play for Sri Lanka, coming in and getting some wickets. That was something that I didn't really anticipate, especially after that initial power play where Bairstow went hammer and tong on them to the point where it was looking like he was going to get 150 odd chasing 180 itself. And honestly, if the catching was of a more international standard, they dropped really two easy chances off Akwizi Moeen Ali and Joe Root, almost back-to-back after Chamira had gotten that Billings wicket, with the extra bounce he generated in Durham. They might have actually been able to pull off an upset. They did really manage to expose some of the weaknesses in this experimentative English lineup put out, right? Livingston looked uncomfortable in that opener slot. He was batting out of position, which explains it. Billings is going through a rough patch in terms of form, a rather bad form, if you will. And Morgan wasn't firing either. Besides a brave showing by a couple of players, though, Sri Lanka never really looked like they were the better side that deserved to win that match. Like in the T20s, their main problem is definitely the batting. It was exposed on a turning tracks in Bangladesh where their key batsmen couldn't really buy a run. And they're revamping, I'll bet one that's been unanticipated, hasn't really changed that dynamic. The guys who are talented are either far too inconsistent. Kusal Perera gets good starts most of the times, but fails to convert those hundreds at the top, hundreds at the top that actually set up the match. That's why he only has 6 hundreds. Or they're literally just making their way to one day or even international cricket. Nisaka has played only 6 matches prior to this one, had a top score of 24. Can't really expect much from him. And Asalanka literally just made his debut, right? So you can't say much for either of them. But combined with the instability of swapping positions in the batting order, like seriously guys, it seems like every time Sri Lanka fields a new lineup on a particular match, everybody's playing out of position, and they've, it looks crazy, man. It really looks crazy. And that's a recipe for disaster, really. And it looks even worse when you're comparing who they're playing up against, right? Willie, who's got probably one of the best power play records in the world, when bowling up front in the innings, where he can get that stifling in-swing with the variation outswinger that can keep the right-handers honest without getting smashed, as he kind of usually does in the death. And Wokes, whose height and a waist movement with his seam position can allow him to snag a couple of top order wickets usually, you're asking for trouble there, right? And that in addition to England's batting juggernaut on flat pitches, right, where literally everybody from 1 to 10 can score a quick fire 50, if not 100. Adil Rashid has in the past. He's their number 10. A Sri Lankan defeat in this match, and with it in the series, looks almost a foregone conclusion. Speaking of flat pitches, the Oval. Apart from Trent Bridge, where England made that 481 world record a couple of years back against Australia, this has got to be one of the flattest surfaces used for ODIs played in England. England themselves, I think, haven't really lost a match here for, 6 years or so. I think it was that New Zealand series in 2015 when they made like 365 for 9 or something crazy like that. In 2015, which was the last time they lost. So it is a happy hunting ground for them. It's not a happy hunting ground for Sri Lanka, although I do remember them chasing down 320 odd against India in that 2017 Champions Trophy. It had gotten to the point during that chase, they won by 8 wickets I think, where Virat looked out of ideas. He was trying to rely on Kedar Jadhav and runouts to get them out. So they can look at that as a blueprint, right? Also because either side, right, whether they win the toss or not, if they win the toss, they will want to bowl first on the surface. And essentially they want to chase second, right? They want to chase batting a target second on. And the main reason behind this is, like the fellow flatty pitch in England, I would say, I mean, they're all flat, but in particular, Nottingham and the Oval are really flat, right, guys? The pitch itself, even though it's a pancake, right, it does have some life and carry in the early morning period, around 10 to 11 a.m., really. 11 to 12 a.m., 12 p.m. accordingly. And I do remember Andre Russell exploiting that, right? Back in 2019 in the World Cup against Pakistan in Trent Bridge, he and O'Shane Thomas and company, they sort of bounced them out for 105. They won the match eventually really easily because it had that sort of life in the surface early morning-ish. And I could see that happening here where somebody who has extra pace like Jamira and somebody who has an extra bounce like Benura Fernando, seriously, that guy's a behemoth at 6'7". They could rock England's standard batting blitzkrieg in those first 20 overs in its tracks, if you will. Going into this match with a prediction of a fantasy XI, Dream 11 or otherwise, I'd say the likelihood of either side seeing its openers lose their wickets cheaply makes selecting a possible opening pair fairly difficult. Going based off form alone from that previous match, I would say initially to go with the likes of Johnny Bairstow and Kusal Perera to open the innings, but given Jason Roy is likely to come back from on his home ground after that injury for this upcoming match, and that this pitch will likely suit his style of batting, there's no lateral movement on offer for the seamers or spinners alike, and it's going to be pretty even pace on the wicket. I'd say ditch Bairstow for Roy in your lineup. Even though Perera is inconsistent, the captaincy, and I know it's early days, but I do think it may have enabled him to take up more responsibility and look towards batting more consistently. At number 3, I've got to stick with that batting star for England in the last match, Joe Root. I am aware that he looked scratchy in that first match, and I do remain unconvinced that he's got that clutch gear, like say somebody like Kohli or Smith has in ODIs, to frequently turn up in series deciders. But barring Kohli, he is still the second batsman in the world when it comes to one-days, guys. And his adjustments and techniques for ODIs that he's done recently, where he's changed his stance slightly to become a better square of the wicket offside player, those third-man dabs that he was doing is a sign of that, makes him an excellent choice for punishing wayward wide bowling from the likes of Chamika Karunaratne, the third seamer of Sri Lanka's, for this sort of firm wicket with bounce. He's got superior strike rotation against the pacers compared to his Sri Lankan counter at number 3, Charith Asalanka, who, yes, he had a 6-ball stay, but he looked bogged down against in his short debut to the pacers and got out to Willie eventually. And that strike rotation will come handy on this venue, which has some of the longer boundaries in England. I'll have Dasun Shanaka and Sam Billings slotted in my team for number 4 and number 5 in the middle order. I know this is a surprise for some of you. Neither of these guys have been in form, and they don't necessarily have the greatest records thus far. Yet the picks that I could alternatively choose for these spots aren't really setting the stage on fire either. Eoin Morgan's form has been suspect for a while now, since that 2019 World Cup win, and a slightly crouched stance, not remotely near as the squatting that he used to do a decade earlier, could make him susceptible to the extra bounce possible in this pitch. And while I loved Hasaranga's owning of that newly thrusted number 5 spot, with his front of the wicket play, seriously, the way it went in to demolish the England's main spinner, Adil Rashid, with those inside-out cover drives, is a work of art to witness. I've got to admit. But I don't think he's yet at the stage of his career to consistently perform in back-to-back matches. Both Shanaka and Billings have points to prove to the critics regarding their lack of form. While Shanaka could also chip in with a wicket or two with his dibbly-dobbly seam-ups, Billings, I feel, with his comparatively sedate stroke play, could stage recovery if early wickets fall. Now, Dhananjaya De Silva could also be an option if he heals in time, but for now I'm assuming he's not playing. If he does, he slots in for Shanaka in that all-rounder number 5 spot. For me, Dhananjaya, Lakshan and Ramesh Mendes are still relatively unknown quantities. While I do try to keep up with domestic Sri Lankan cricket from time to time, these two names admittedly have slipped my radar, apart from a couple of highlights I watched when they were playing in the LPL. To be honest, I rate neither. Dhananjaya Lakshan looks like a full-on trundler to me, with his 75 miles per hour gun barrel straight deliveries during the middle overs, unlikely to cause much trouble for the English batsman. Ramesh Mendes too, with his flattish non-turning off breaks, doesn't really impress me that much. Neither looked comfortable batting in the first ODI as well, so I'm going to stick with the English options in their spot, i.e. Moeen Ali at 6 and Sam Curran at 7. Even though both of them didn't really have a great first match, with Moeen edging that delivery and nearly choking in the run chase when he first came in, and Sam Curran not really getting amongst the wickets like his fellow left-hander Willie, they both have abilities to provide rapid cameos of the bat and keep things tight in the allotted overs on occasion with the ball in one days. Now coming on to the bowlers, I feel this is probably the most straightforward decision of them all. Chamika Karunaratne looks out of his depth in international cricket every time I've seen him. He bowls too short, too wide, or sprays it on the bat at least once or twice an over. That, combined with the lack of height and pace that he has, bowls only in the mid 130s at most, guys, that makes him really cannon fodder on this pitch. With my pick at number 9, David Willey, you get, in contrast, somebody who's very likely, with his excellent wrist position, to swing it at the start of the innings, like I was saying, and get you a couple of wickets at the top of the order. Binura Fernando is my number 10 for this XI. His propensity to extract awkward bounce on most surfaces means that he can be harder to hit. We saw proof of that in the last match. He barely went for 5 runs and over, while many of the others continued to leak runs after that Johnny Bairstow outburst subsided. Although Adil Rashid has been a solid performer for England over the years, Sri Lanka's batsmen do seem to handle leg spinners comparatively easily compared to other types of bowling. I don't see him taking a stack of wickets this time around like he usually does. To round out this XI, I'm faced with the dilemma of picking the informed Dushmantha Chameera, who's come back from an injury admirably, I might add, or English cult hero Mark Wood. Both are comfortably the fastest bowlers in their squad. Each bowls consistently over 140 km per hour. Both skid off the surface. Chameera does it via very slightly slingy action. Mark Wood achieves that same sort of effect with his long run-up and his jump, even though it's slightly different of a proposition for a batsman. I'm going to take a gamble here and go with Mark Wood. Despite all the evidence pointing, to Chameera having a good match on his past couple of performances, he got a 4 in the T20s, he got a 3 in the last match. I just feel that Wood has been getting back into rhythm, and if he's going to be used well in those middle overs especially, he could jolt this vulnerable Sri Lankan batting side with 90 miles per hour plus thunderbolts. With all that said, guys, I'm going to call it a day. I hope we have a competitive match in the series decider. For England, this will be a chance to cement a new batting combination going forward for that 2023 World Cup. For Sri Lanka, a win here is going to be really crucial to them, right? Because they need to qualify for that upcoming World Cup, and it's looking like they're going to have to compete with some of the non-full members for that slot, which is pretty bad. Either ways, I'll be watching, and I will relay my thoughts to you guys soon in a review of that match going forward. So, yeah, guys, take care, and bye-bye.